How does a person build an absolute empire out of fear? And, maybe more importantly, how fast can that entire empire come crashing down? Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to dive right into the wild rise and spectacular fall of Joseph McCarthy. We're talking about a Republican senator from Wisconsin who literally defined an era by stoking some of the deepest anxieties of the early Cold War. We'll unpack exactly how he grabbed power, the aggressive tactics he used to keep it, and the massive public spectacle that finally brought him down. So, let's get into it.
Now, before we get into the man himself, we really need to understand the word he left behind, McCarthyism. It actually started as a caption in a political cartoon way back in 1950, but man has it grown since then. Today it means something very specific, using demagogic, reckless, and completely unsubstantiated accusations to attack your political opponents, basically questioning someone's patriotism without bringing the receipts. Understanding this style of political warfare is absolutely crucial to understanding McCarthy. Keep that in the back of your mind as we trace his beginnings.
Section 1. The Hustle. Early ambition and rule bending.
You've got to give the guy credit for his relentless hustle. I mean, he dropped out of school at 14, worked odd jobs, and somehow still pushed his way through Marquette University to get a law degree by 1935. But here's the thing, he was always willing to bend the rules. Back in 1939, he wanted a judicial seat held by a guy named Edgar Werner. Instead of just running on his own merits, McCarthy straight up lied. He ran a campaign claiming Werner was 73 years old and too physically infirm to do the job. The reality? Werner was only 66. And it worked. This blatant weaponization of false information made McCarthy the youngest circuit judge in state history, and it set a pretty dangerous precedent for everything that came next.
When World War II rolled around, McCarthy joined the Marines and completely rebranded himself. He started calling himself Tail Gunner Joe, telling everyone he flew 32 dangerous combat missions. Well, the historical reality is quite a bit different. He actually worked a relatively safe desk job as an intelligence briefing officer. Get this, he literally forged his own letter of commendation, signing his commanding officer's name to it. And that severe leg wound he said he got from anti-aircraft fire, nope, actually happened during a wild hazing party while crossing the equator on a ship. It was pure myth-making, designed from the ground up to build political capital.
Then comes his run for the Senate against incumbent Robert M. La Follette Jr. McCarthy goes on the attack, ruthlessly accusing La Follette of war profiteering. But wait, here's the kicker. That same year, 1943, McCarthy mysteriously netted a massive $42,000 profit in the stock market himself. To put that into perspective for you, that's well over $750,000 today. Talk about glaring hypocrisy, right? But it didn't even matter. His aggressive, heavily funded tactics totally worked, and they launched him straight into the United States Senate.
Section 2. The Spark. The 1950 Wheeling Speech.
Okay, picture the scene in 1950. America was genuinely terrified. The Soviets had the atomic bomb, China had just fallen to communism, and McCarthy, well, the press corps had just voted him the worst senator in the U.S. So he desperately needed a spark, and on February 9th, he lit a match. Standing in front of a Republican women's club in Wheeling, West Virginia, he holds up a piece of paper. He declares right then and there that he has a list of 205 known communists actively working in the U.S. government. Boom, the press goes absolutely wild. It was pure explosive chaos, and suddenly the whole country wanted to know what was on that list.
But almost immediately, the story starts to change. Just days later, McCarthy sends a telegram to President Truman, and suddenly that list of 205 communists, it shrinks down to just 57. He was clearly taken aback by the massive media frenzy and the intense pressure to actually provide proof. So his claims just kept shifting. You see, the actual facts didn't seem to matter to him half as much as the sheer shock value of the accusation itself.
And the wild ride continues. By February 20th, when he's speaking on the Senate floor, the number morphs yet again, this time to 81. The facts were totally fluid. He was basically recycling old, outdated cases from a House Appropriations Committee report, totally exaggerating the evidence. He'd take a phrase like incline towards communism and just casually convert it into an absolute declaration of treason. It was a masterclass in shifting the goalposts.
Section 3. The Era of McCarthyism, the Power and the Panic.
You'd think people would catch on, right? I mean, an initial Senate committee investigated his claims and literally labeled them a fraud and a hoax. But the fear in the country was just too intense. Nobody felt safe. By 1953, McCarthy is using this tidal wave of panic to unseat his rivals and make himself one of the most feared men in Washington. He's casting this massive net. We're talking interrogations at the State Department, the Voice of America, demanding libraries pull books off their shelves. He even kicked off what's known as the Lavender Scare, targeting gay government workers.
The twisted logic was that anyone hiding their sexuality was somehow vulnerable to Soviet blackmail. It led to countless people losing their livelihoods based purely on their private lives.
And to show you just how untouchable he felt, he actually aimed his crosshairs at George Marshall. He accused Marshall of participating in, quote, a conspiracy so immense and an infamy so black as to dwarf any previous venture in the history of man. This is George Marshall we're talking about, a World War II hero, the architect of post-war peace in Europe, and Truman's own Secretary of Defense. By going after someone with that level of prestige, McCarthy was sending a crystal-clear message. Absolutely no one is immune. He even started calling the Democratic administrations guilty of 20 years of treason.
Section 4. Taking on the Army, the fatal overreach. For years, heavyweights like Presidents Truman and Eisenhower just tried to steer clear of McCarthy. They didn't want the political blowback of taking him on directly. But then McCarthy crossed a massive line. He went after the United States Army. He zeroed in on Irving Perez, an Army dentist with some left-wing affiliations who had taken the Fifth Amendment. When Perez was given a completely routine honorable discharge by his commander, Brigadier General Ralph Swicker, McCarthy lost it. He hauls the general in, aggressively berates him, and starts screaming, "Who promoted Perez?" He used this as a rallying cry, demanding court-martials and openly accusing the military bureaucracy of a massive cover-up. Talk about poking the bear, right?
Section 5. The Swift Downfall. Televised Defeat.
So, the Army fights back, leading to the famous Army-McCarthy hearings of 1954. And this was a huge deal because it was broadcast live to an estimated 20 million viewers over 36 days. For the very first time, the American public is watching his raw, unfiltered bullying live in their living rooms. And right around this time, the tide of public opinion takes a massive hit thanks to journalist Edward R. Murrow. Murrow aired a devastating TV documentary using basically nothing but clips of McCarthy's own behavior. He brilliantly pointed out that the line between investigating and persecuting is a very fine one. It was a complete game-changer to have such a respected voice finally challenge the senator on national television. The spell was breaking.
But the definitive nail-in-the-coffin moment happened right there on live TV during the hearings. Out of nowhere, McCarthy decides to smear a young, totally uninvolved attorney who worked in the law firm of the Army's lead counsel, Joseph N. Welch. Welch, who is just visibly exhausted by the cruelty of it all, finally snaps back. He delivers his absolute haymaker of a line. "Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You've done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir, at long last?" It was the emotional climax of the entire saga. The gallery literally erupted in applause. In that one moment, the facade of the tough investigator completely shattered, and all that was left was a reckless bully.
If you want to see exactly what live television did to his career, just look at the numbers. They are wild. In January of 1954, just before the Murrow broadcast and the hearings, he was sitting pretty comfortably with a 50% favorability rating. But by August, that number had absolutely cratered to just 36%, while his unfavorable numbers went through the roof. The American public had finally seen enough. Exposing him to the light of day completely broke the spell of fear.
The speed of his implosion is honestly staggering. Right after the hearings, a huge grassroots movement called Joe Must Go pops up, gathering hundreds of thousands of recall signatures in his home state of Wisconsin. Seeing the writing on the wall, the Senate finally grows a backbone. In December of 1954, by a massive vote of 67 to 22, the U.S. Senate officially censors Joseph McCarthy for abusing his colleagues and refusing to cooperate with investigations. Just like that, he was stripped of his power, he faded into obscurity, and died just 3 years later at the age of 48.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to chew on. How quickly can the politics of fear consume the one who wields it? McCarthy built an absolute empire out of empty accusations, shifting numbers, and the very real anxieties of the American people. But history shows us that the second the public got an unfiltered look at his actual methods, the whole foundation crumbled to dust. It's a fascinating and honestly sobering reminder. Fear is a powerful tool to climb to the top, but it is an incredibly fragile foundation to stand on once the cameras start rolling. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning what you see.